She cheated with her boss during our 10-year marriage, then filed for divorce to claim our $300, $0 house and half my $250, $0 retirement savings, only to find out he's been secretly funding her legal battle with a $150, $0 loan I never knew about. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this, but here I am, trying to piece together the mess that's become my life. It all started with little signs, things I brushed off at first, like her spending more time at work, excuses about stress, and her suddenly being more secretive with her phone. But then I noticed the little things that didn't add up, her phone always locked, her texts disappearing, and her being unusually defensive whenever I asked about her day. We've been married for 10 years. Rachel was always a bit of a bitch, honestly. She had a sharp tongue, a quick temper, and a way of twisting things to make herself look like the victim. But I loved her. I thought that was enough. We built a life together, 2 kids, a nice house worth about $300, $0, and a retirement savings that I'd been steadily contributing to for over a decade, around $250, $0. I worked hard and I thought she did too until the signs started to pile up. The first real clue came when I found her phone one night. I was about to go to bed and I noticed her phone was on the nightstand, buzzing nonstop. Usually she'd just turn it off or put it on silent if she was sleeping. I picked it up and there were messages, flirty, suggestive texts from someone named Mike. My stomach dropped. I knew that name. Mike was her boss at the marketing firm she worked for. I'd always suspected she flirted with him, but I never thought it was serious. Seeing those texts changed everything. I didn't confront her then. Instead, I spent the night staring at the ceiling, trying to process what I'd just discovered. Over the next few days, I started paying more attention. I noticed she was more distant, more defensive. She'd lie about where she was going, claim she was working late, but I found receipts for dinners and drinks at places I'd never heard of. I even caught her sneaking her phone into the bathroom when she thought I wasn't looking. One night, I decided to follow her. I waited until she left for her work dinner and I tracked her to a fancy hotel downtown. I saw her go inside with Mike. That's when I knew for sure she was cheating, and it was with her boss. The betrayal hit me like a punch in the gut. 10 years of marriage and she's been screwing around with a guy who's probably half my age. I felt numb, angry, and utterly betrayed. The next morning I confronted her. I told her I knew about Mike, that I'd seen her with him. Her face twisted into a sneer and she started spinning lies about how I was overreacting, how I was just paranoid. She told me he was just a friend, that I was jealous and insecure, but I saw right through her. She was lying and I knew it. The way she looked at me, defensive, contemptuous, made my stomach churn. I felt a mix of rage and sadness. I trusted her, loved her, built a life with her. And now I knew she'd been lying to my face every day. The pain of betrayal was overwhelming. I wondered how I could have missed the signs, how I'd been so blind. I felt stupid for not seeing it earlier, but mostly I was furious. Furious at her, furious at myself for trusting her, and furious at the whole situation. But what hurt most was knowing she was planning to take everything. Our house, half my retirement savings. I had worked so hard to build that life, and now I was afraid she'd just take it all away like it was nothing. I started to realize that this wasn't just about infidelity. It was about control, greed, and her willingness to destroy what we had for her own selfish gain. I knew I had to do something, but I wasn't sure what yet. I only knew one thing: this wasn't over. I was going to fight for what was mine, and I was going to make her pay for what she did. After the initial shock and the rage that followed the confrontation, I spent days just trying to breathe. I couldn't believe the woman I married, the woman I thought I knew, had been cheating on me with her boss for months. It wasn't just a fling, it was a full-blown affair. And the worst part, she was planning to take everything I worked for, our house, half my retirement savings, everything. I felt like I was in some kind of nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I started digging into her finances. I needed to understand exactly what I was up against. That's when I discovered the real bombshell. She had been secretly funded by her boss, Mike. Turns out he had loaned her $150, $0 to cover her legal battles, to help her file for divorce and fight for the house and the money. I never knew about this loan. It was hidden in some shady account, and she'd been lying to me about everything, about her work, her finances, her entire life. When I found out, I was furious. Who the hell loans $150, $0 to his employee's wife? That's not just a gift, it's a calculated move. It made me realize how deep her lies went. She wasn't just cheating, she was actively plotting to drain me dry with her boss's help. That realization made my blood boil. I felt betrayed on every level, emotionally, financially, and legally. I started thinking about how I could fight back. I wasn't just going to roll over and let her take everything. I contacted a lawyer, a guy I found through some recommendations. We went through all the documents I had, and I made it clear I wanted to protect my assets. I knew she'd try to use the legal system to her advantage, especially with the backing of Mike's money. I had to be smart. I started gathering evidence, screenshots of her texts, bank statements, anything that proved her affair and her financial scheming. Meanwhile, she kept up her act, crying, claiming she loved me, saying I was paranoid. She even accused me of cheating, trying to turn the tables. I didn't fall for it. I knew her game. She's always been manipulative, a master at lying and twisting things around. But I had enough. I was done playing nice. I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything I'd built. I decided I'd fight for my rights, for my privacy, and for my dignity. It was around this time I started to realize how much I'd been blind. I'd always thought she was just a bitchy wife, maybe a little difficult, but I never suspected she'd do something this cold and calculated. The woman I married was gone. She was replaced by someone willing to destroy our marriage for money and some twisted idea of revenge. I felt sick thinking about what she was capable of, how far she'd go. And then there was the emotional toll. Every day I felt like I was walking on a razor's edge, angry one minute, devastated the next. I'd built my entire life around her, and now I was losing it all. The house, the savings, the future I envisioned. I kept asking myself how I could have been so stupid, how I missed the signs, how I let her manipulate me for so long. But I knew one thing: I wasn't going down without a fight. I was going to protect what was mine, no matter what it took. I started to plan my next move, consulting with lawyers, gathering more evidence, preparing for the inevitable court battle. I knew she'd try to drag this out to wear me down, but I wasn't going to let her. I also knew there was a part of me that still hoped she'd come to her senses and admit she was wrong. But deep down, I knew she was too far gone. She'd already crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. All I could do now was brace myself for what was coming and get ready to fight for my life, my money, and my dignity. The legal process started slowly but inevitably. I met with my lawyer, a sharp guy named Tom who knew how these things go. He warned me that Rachel would do everything in her power to spin stories, manipulate the situation, and try to get what she wanted: our house, my retirement, my savings. He also told me about the possibility of her claiming she was entitled to half of everything, even if she was cheating on me. That was a bitter pill to swallow, but I knew I had to be prepared for the worst. What really set me off was discovering how deeply involved Mike was in all this. Not just as her boss, but as her financial backer. I found bank statements showing that Mike had transferred that $150, $0 loan into her account, supposedly as a personal loan, but it was clearly meant to fund her legal fight. I couldn't believe he was willing to bankroll her betrayal, probably for his own sick satisfaction. I mean, who does that? Funding a legal war against someone they're supposed to care about. It was disgusting. I started to feel like I was fighting a war on two fronts, legal and emotional. Rachel kept lying, claiming she was only doing this to protect her future and that I was just jealous and insecure. She threw out every excuse in the book, saying she was saving her marriage, that I was controlling, that she needed this to get out of her abusive marriage. I knew she was lying. She'd been cheating on me for months, maybe longer, and now she was trying to use the legal system to her advantage. One day, I found something that made my blood run cold. I came across a series of emails between her and Mike, where he was pushing her to stand her ground, promising her he'd take care of everything. The tone was cold, calculating, almost like they were talking about a business deal, not a marriage. It made me realize how much she was willing to betray me, probably for money, maybe just for the thrill of screwing someone over. I had to get this evidence to my lawyer immediately. Meanwhile, Rachel was still playing the victim, crying about how unfair everything was, how I was trying to ruin her, and how she deserved the house and the savings because she was the one who built this family. That was a load of crap. She hadn't built anything. She'd been riding on my hard work all these years. She was just trying to take everything I had for her own selfish reasons. I couldn't stand to hear her spin her lies anymore, but I knew I had to keep my cool. The emotional toll was starting to hit hard. I felt like I was losing my mind, constantly on edge, wondering what she was going to do next. I'd wake up in the middle of the night thinking about her with Mike, about her lying and scheming behind my back. Every time I looked at her, I saw the woman I once loved, cold, manipulative, and willing to destroy everything for her own gain. I hated her for it, but I also hated myself for not seeing it sooner. I made the decision to start documenting everything, every conversation, every financial transaction, every lie she told. I knew this was going to be a long fight, and I needed to be prepared. I also started secretly talking to a few friends I trusted, just to get some perspective. Most of them told me to stay strong, to fight for what's mine, and to not let her manipulate me anymore. That was the kind of support I needed because, honestly, I felt pretty alone in this. I also began to realize that I had to get my finances in order. I transferred some money into a separate account, changed passwords, and made sure I had control over my assets. I couldn't let her or Mike drain me dry. I was starting to see the bigger picture. This wasn't just about the house or the money. It was about standing up for myself and not letting her destroy what I'd worked so hard for. I'd been naive, trusting her blindly, but now I understood that I had to be ruthless if I wanted to come out of this with some shred of dignity intact. Every day felt like a battle, and I was just trying to hold myself together. I knew the worst was still to come. The legal fight was only beginning, and I had no idea how much more she was willing to push to get her way. But I was determined. I'd fight every step of the way, and I'd do whatever it took to make her pay for what she'd done. This was no longer just about the betrayal. It was about reclaiming my life, my money, and my respect. The legal proceedings moved faster than I expected, and I quickly realized how much she was willing to manipulate the system. Rachel, with her bitchy attitude and endless lies, started claiming she was entitled to half of everything. Our house, my retirement, even my savings, despite the fact that she'd been screwing around and hiding money all along. She threw out accusations about me being controlling, about how I was abusive in some twisted attempt to paint herself as the victim. It was so predictable. She always played the victim, even when she was the one cheating and scheming. Her lawyer was aggressive, pushing hard to get the house and half my retirement. I had my own team, of course, and I was prepared. I had gathered all the evidence, screenshots of her texts with Mike, bank statements showing the secret loan, emails where Mike was clearly pushing her to stand her ground, and her own lies about her whereabouts. I knew I had a solid case, but it was going to be a fight, and I could see she was willing to do whatever it took to win. One of the most shocking moments came during the court hearing when her lawyer tried to argue that she was entitled to half of everything because she was married for 10 years. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She had the nerve to claim she deserved the house because she contributed to the marriage. She was busy screwing her boss and draining my savings. That's contribution. I felt a mix of rage and disgust. I wanted to scream at her, but I kept my composure. I knew I had to stay calm if I wanted to win. Rachel's reaction to the evidence was classic. She tried to deny everything, said she and Mike were just friends, that she never took any money from him and that I was just paranoid. But the emails and bank statements told a different story. I had her dead to rights. Still, she kept twisting her words, crying crocodile tears about how her marriage was over, how she was just trying to find happiness, and how I was trying to control her life. I couldn't take her crocodile tears seriously anymore. It was all a performance. The emotional toll was brutal. Seeing her in court, knowing she'd lied to my face so many times, made me want to scream. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and downright furious. I'd spent years building a life with her, and she was trying to throw it all away for some affair and a shady loan from her boss. I kept asking myself how I missed the signs, how I was so blind to her manipulations. But I knew I couldn't dwell on that now. I had to focus on winning, protecting what was legally mine. Meanwhile, the financial pressure was mounting. I had to make decisions fast. I transferred more money into a separate account, just in case she tried to drain me further. I also started consulting with a financial advisor, trying to figure out how to protect what was left of my savings. I couldn't let her or Mike get away with stealing my future. I knew the court would be a battleground, but I was determined to come out on top. What really pushed me was the realization that she'd been lying to me for so long, about her job, about her money, about her feelings. She'd been using me, manipulating me, all while pretending to be the perfect wife. That realization hit hard. I'd been naive, but I wasn't going to be a sucker anymore. I was done being her pawn. Now I was playing to win. As I sat in that courtroom, listening to her lies and her lawyer's arguments, I knew this was only the beginning. She was stubborn, manipulative, and relentless. But so was I had to be. For the first time in a long while, I felt a flicker of hope. Hope that I could get through this, that I could reclaim my life, and that someday I'd look back at this and know I fought with everything I had. Because if there's one thing I learned, it's that betrayal cuts deep, but the fight to protect what's yours is even deeper. The court date came and went, and honestly, I felt like I'd been run over by a train afterward. The judge was stern, the lawyers did their dance, and in the end, the ruling was more or less what I expected. Rachel would get the house, but only because I managed to convince the court that the loan from Mike was a personal gift meant to support her, not part of the marital assets. That was a small win, but it didn't erase the sting of betrayal or the fact that she'd been screwing around behind my back for months. What hit me hardest was realizing how much she'd manipulated the entire situation. She lied about her whereabouts, lied about her feelings, and even lied about the money. The loan from Mike, which I thought was just a shady personal loan, was actually a calculated move on his part. He'd funded her legal battle to make sure she'd have enough to fight me, to take the house and the retirement. I still can't wrap my head around how deep this all went, how much she was willing to betray everything for some sick revenge and greed. After the court session, I sat in my car trying to process everything. My mind was racing. What do I do now? I had to figure out my next move because I knew she'd keep pushing, keep trying to manipulate the system to her advantage. She'd already shown she was capable of lying with a straight face, and I wasn't about to let her walk away with everything. I knew I had to be strategic, quiet, and strong. I reached out to my lawyer and told him I wanted to freeze her access to the house, to the money, and to any joint accounts. I wanted to make sure she couldn't just drain me further. Meanwhile, I also started to reflect on what this all meant. I'd spent 10 years building a life with her, and now I was standing here, watching her try to take it all away. I felt a mixture of heartbreak and anger. Heartbreak because I'd truly loved her, and anger because she'd thrown it all away for Mike, for money, for some twisted sense of power. I couldn't believe she'd been so selfish, so manipulative, so willing to destroy us for her own gain. I also thought about the house, my sanctuary, my investment, my family's home. She claimed she deserved it because she was married for 10 years, but I knew she didn't deserve it. She'd been cheating, lying, and scheming. I made a decision then, if I could, I'd fight to keep what was rightfully mine. I didn't want her to walk away with everything, especially not with the money she'd been secretly funded with. I started looking into how I could challenge her claim, how I could prove that the loan was part of her scheme to drain me. The emotional toll was still heavy. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and exhausted. I'd always been a straightforward guy, worked hard, paid my bills, trusted my wife. Now I was fighting for my life, fighting for what I'd built. I couldn't sleep well anymore. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her with Mike, the lies she told, the money she stole. It was a nightmare I couldn't wake up from, but despite all this, I knew I had to keep going. I had to fight for my future, for my money, for my dignity. I started to plan my next steps, consulting with a financial advisor, tightening my security, and preparing for what I knew would be a long legal battle. I also reached out to a divorce counselor, not because I believed we could save the marriage anymore, but because I needed to understand how to deal with the emotional fallout. I was losing my wife, my home, my sense of stability, and I had to find a way to move forward without losing myself. Looking back now, I realize how much I've learned from this nightmare. Trust is fragile, and betrayal can come from the people you least suspect. But I also learned that I'm stronger than I thought. I won't let her or Mike walk all over me. I'll fight for what's mine, for my dignity and for my peace. This isn't the end. I still have a lot to rebuild, but I know I'll come out of this someday, a lot wiser and a lot more cautious about who I let into my life. In the end, I managed to get through the storm, though it left scars I'll carry for a long time. The final court ruling wasn't perfect, but it was enough to keep her from taking everything. She got the house, but I retained control of my retirement savings and most of what I'd worked so hard to build. The judge saw through her manipulations and the shady loan from Mike, which was a relief. Still, the victory felt hollow, like I'd won a battle but lost so much more in the process. Looking back, I realize how much this experience changed me. I used to trust blindly, believing in the best of people, but now I see how easily betrayal can happen when greed and selfishness take over. Rachel's lies, her manipulations, her willingness to destroy everything for money, they've opened my eyes. I understand now that I should never take anyone's word at face value, especially when they're desperate or angry. Trust, I've learned, must be earned, not given freely. The emotional aftermath was the hardest part. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and angry, so angry I thought I'd burst. But I also found strength I didn't know I had. I sought therapy, started rebuilding my confidence, and focused on my kids. They are the reason I kept fighting, even on my darkest days. Watching them grow and seeing their resilience reminded me that I still have purpose, even after everything I lost. One of the biggest lessons I take from this is that revenge, while tempting, isn't always the answer. I didn't want to stoop to her level, but I made sure she understood she couldn't walk all over me. I fought with honesty, with integrity, and with the law on my side. That's what kept me grounded. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well, proving that I can rebuild and move forward without her. Now I'm focusing on my future, saving what I have left, repairing my life, and making sure I never let anyone manipulate me again. I've cut ties with people who brought me down, and I've become more cautious about who I trust and how I trust. I know I'll never forget what happened, but I also know I can learn from it. I've grown stronger, more aware, and more determined to protect myself and my family. To anyone out there going through something similar, trust your instincts, document everything, and don't be afraid to fight for what's rightfully yours. Betrayal cuts deep, but it also teaches you resilience. Life will throw you curveballs, but you have the power to decide how to handle them. I've learned that the hard way. Now I'm just taking it one day at a time, grateful for the lessons and hopeful for what the future holds.